about Act 1, Scene 2 of Shakespeare's Othello. At the start of Scene 2, Iago and Othello enter the scene, again in Venice, still in Venice, and Iago tells Othello that Rodrigo has exposed his marriage to Desdemona to her father Brabantio, who we now learn is in pursuit of Othello to bring him to justice under the Duke. An important historical note here: the Duke is the head of state in Venice. In Italy at this time, there was no Italy. It was a number of city states, Venice being probably at this time the wealthiest and most well known. It was probably the biggest trading port in the Mediterranean. The Duke would have wielded a ton of power, including the power to decide whether or not a marriage was legitimate. Um, Another important point, I think, is that Brabantio is not a nobody in Venice. He is a senator, and we're going to see later in Act 1, Scene 3 that he's sort of shirking some of his duties on the evening that he's at home, although nothing is ever made of that. Othello reiterates in this moment that he's entirely unconcerned about this whole accusation. He loves Desdemona and he has a solid reputation because of his military status. Othello, from what we can tell, seems to be an army general for hire. Venice at this time probably didn't have a standing army, and so instead relied on these renton armies that Othello would have been head of. When some torches approach Othello and Iago suddenly says, okay, you better run. This is probably Brabantio. It's not. It's actually Cassio. Michael Cassio, Othello's newly appointed lieutenant, who arrives to inform him that the Duke seeks his help in Cyprus. Brabantio then appears, as was expected, and calls for Othello to be arrested. Othello, who is on his way to the Duke's anyways, calmly agrees to go. So some analysis now. Brabantio calls Othello a sooty bosom, and maintains that Othello has cast some sort of spell on Desdemona in order to win her over. The war that's about to happen in Cyprus offers an important change in scenery for the upcoming events in the play. They're an important counterpoint to what is happening in Venice. In some cases, critics have read this as an expedient plot. You'll remember, if you've read other Shakespearean plays like The Merchant of Venice, that there are very, very strict rules around Venetians, specifically Catholic Venetians, murdering another Venetian. Although murder is unjustified anywhere, it is especially looked down upon on Venetian soil. Moving the plot away from Venice and towards Cyprus gets around the strict rules in Venice about non-Catholics spilling Venetian blood on home soil. We also get a great deal of appearance versus reality. Simply, Iago tells Rodrigo one thing and entirely means the other in this scene. Othello also suggests that he would not give up any sum of treasure in the sea to have Desdemona. He says on line 28 that for the sea's worth he would put himself homeless for the sea's worth in order to have her love. This is ironic given that the metaphor used, or the association used earlier with Othello, was that of a thief who was robbing Brabantio of his dowry in Act 1, Scene 1. Now we have Othello, who is so pure and so good, so honest, and immodest, that he would rather have the love of Desdemona over any sum of wealth. Brabantio, on the other hand, is intent on figuring out how Othello has charmed his daughter. He says, "Judge me the world, if 'tis not gross in sense, that thou hast practised on her with foul charms, abused her delicate youth with drugs or minerals that weaken motion. I'll have it disputed on, 'tis probable and palpable to thinking." Here again, just as in Act 1, Scene 1, Brabantio suggests that Othello in some way pollutes Desdemona's youth and maidenhood, again in relation to her virginity, with charms. It's reiterated over and over again in this play. There is some sense, I think, in which Brabantio is defining again that the love between this Moor and this fair, this white woman, this white Venetian woman, is in some sense gross in sense it is unnatural to the order of things.